It's Oops All Dragons. Hi, I am your intro boy, Lisa.
I'm Faerun.
And this is once again, you know it, you love it, it's Oops All Dragons, the podcast where we talk about D&D and nerdy stuff and tabletop stuff and generally just sort of yap at each other. We've got another lore episode. Amanda, say hi.
Hello.
It's very early for Lisa.
It is quite early for me. You know, the good people at home have places to be.
Things to do. All right. So let's we know we're going to dive into some D&D lore, but right before we do that, what has everyone been up to? Lisa, you start.
Oh boy, I've actually been doing things. Isn't that exciting?
That's new.
I went to the Renaissance Festival yesterday.
Ooh!
It was my first time at the Renaissance Festival, which is a crazy thing for someone like me to say. Because every time I tell people, like, oh, I've never been, they're like,
any?
You? Ever?
What?
Yeah. I actually wore the horns that you got.
Yeah, way back when.
A million years ago. And, like, I made myself a little outfit. It was like a chemise that I had made a while ago in a little kirtle. And then I, like, bonded with some little old ladies who are part of the Queen's court.
Were you just role-playing Dot, like, a little bit at the Renaissance Fair?
A little bit.
Your tiefling character with your horns.
One of the vendors, I went to get, like, a beer or something, one of the vendors was like, no, I don't serve demons. I'm like,
wow.
Nice. I love that. But I'm like, but I have money. And he was like, okay, I'll give you.
It's like, alright, fine.
But, yeah, some of the, like, the ladies of the Queen's court, I ended up, like, bonding with them over historical costuming, and I did some, like, what's the word?
Networking?
Networking. That's the word.
Some historical Renaissance fair costuming networking.
Yes, some hyper-specific networking yesterday, which was honestly delightful. They brought me up to meet the Queen, because she introduced me as an apprentice tailor, and that felt great. And then whenever we were in line for something, of course I brought my giant dice, my one giant D20.
Awesome.
And we were just basically playing rollies, where we would just say, like, somebody call out a number, 12, roll it. It's a 1! That was a good time.
We played with that thing one time, and it always screws you when you use it.
No, it's really, like, an incredible phenomenon how that 1d20, anybody else will always get over a 10. I have personally never rolled over a 10.
I've never seen you roll.
I don't know why I
I've never seen you roll anything high with that dice.
It's the dice gods challenging your hubris. It's like, how dare you purchase such a large D20?
Exactly. But it's big and it's red, and I'm like, I'm still gonna roll it. I think it's funny.
I don't care if this is cursed.
Have you tried offering something to the gods? Leave some bread and milk out for a few days, see if your odds improve.
Have you tried offering things to demons?
Yeah, that also works. I mean, the cost is a little higher, but I heard the results are great.
No, I just do it out of spite now. I just keep rolling it.
So yeah, you've never been to the Renaissance Fair, like, even down here in Florida?
Nope.
Whoa.
I couldn't go to the one in Florida because there's people who don't like me who worked there.
Yikes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like,
it's fine. It's what happens.
Alright. Like, I am not a super fan of the Renaissance Fair. I went once, a couple times in, like, middle school, high school, and, like, it was fine. But I mainly liked it because we got a day off of school for it. But then as an adult, I'm like, I'm getting less and less out of this.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man, I just day drinking, man.
Exactly.
I was usually driving.
I bought a beer
Nobody doesn't drive.
Beer at 11 a.m.
Nobody doesn't drive, so
Yeah.
I'm the one who has to, stay sober here. So I couldn't really do that.
Have you played Drunk by Noon?
Definitely
Oh
not.
my god.
Okay, because that is the point of going to the Renaissance Festival.
Okay, that's a different
I gotta
game.
go again.
We'll wear this hat,
One.
and I'm gonna be drunk before noon.
have to go with the group for that one.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Or Uber.
apparently it chose a good weekend to go to because it was like a high of 80 yesterday, and then next weekend we were thinking about going next weekend instead, and nope, next weekend is gonna be like a high of like 100 and something.
Oh.
That was another thing I didn't like because
Yeah.
usually the weather was terrible whenever we went.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to go to New York. I heard that their Renaissance Festival is really nice,
New
and
York
also
one
they have
had-
the weather.
Yeah, the Maryland one is the one that I hear is really good because it's like in a forest,
Oh,
so it's really
Ooh.
immersive.
okay.
Yeah,
So-
so that's my goal is to go to the Maryland one next. But yes, I had a good time at Nerd Coachella. It was exactly that dusty. I got home and I blew my nose and it came out like black. And I was
Yep,
like,
Yep.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so you are just like one step away from just like actually LARPing, huh?
Oh, 100%.
Just like find a very like
I'm
chill
on that
LARP group.
precipice. I'm on that precipice. I know people who like have invited me to LARP with them. Like
Oh, Lisa,
it's
it's gonna happen.
or either that or I'm like really gonna go off the deep end with this historical costuming.
There's two paths ahead of you. They're both incredibly nerdy, but which way are you going?
Oh boy, they're both incredibly nerdy and incredibly expensive.
Yeah. I can
yeah.
see you. I can see you like wanting to find a really chill LARP group, not really combat focused. It's just like everyone's role playing a town, and you just want to role play a town, and you just want to be a
that's
tiefling
what the
or
Ren
whatever.
Fair is like the people
Yeah,
who
but
work there.
they may
they're
frown
role-playing
upon
a
like
town.
they may frown upon like elves and orcs and tieflings showing up and doing magic, but
Not
like
really.
in
Not
a LARP
really
group.
anymore.
Okay.
They used to be more strict about like the historical accuracy,
'Cause I
think
know
the recent
some were.
trend of the festivals is more like Renaissance fantasy than like pure Renaissance.
Yeah.
True. I have seen a lot of
I
pirates
saw a lot
around.
of people dressed up as little mushroom fairies, and
Yeah.
there's one girl that I thought was a really clever twist on it. She was like a black mushroom, and she had little orc tusks, and I thought that was really fun.
Okay.
Aw.
Trying to be cute. And,
Like a truffle?
She was still very cute. But she was like a little truffle, yeah. It was really cute.
They're leaning into it. All right, that's good.
Yeah, really leaning into like the fantasy aspect of it.
All right.
But like a lot of the characters there are still very much like it's the Elizabethan court, it's the clans, whatever. Like a lot of the like built-in actors are like historical, quote unquote, and then like the guests and the vendors are leaning more into the fairy fantasy kind of thing.
Okay. True. I literally did buy you a set of like wood carved devil, demon tiefling horns.
I think
as a
the same
present.
vendor was there because like one of the first booths I came across was had the same horns there. And then I was looking for, usually there's like a vendor who sells ears, and I couldn't find
Elf ears.
a vendor that sold like elf ears, and I'm like, that's what I need.
You need
I
options.
But yeah,
Okay.
and honestly, if it wasn't for the fact that I was already waking up at like 5 a.m. to get ready for it, because complicated. Like if I was a little bit gutsier, I would have woken up a little earlier and painted myself red. But it was a lot.
That might have been a little tough with the heat, though.
Yeah. No, at one point, like the sunscreen, I had sunscreen on, obviously. And at one point, I got so sweaty, it kept getting in my eyes and making me look like I was crying. It just burns. It's just burning. And
I'm not sad. I'm just in pain.
I'm in this one booth, and he's selling crystals and stuff, but I'm looking at the crystals, and it looks like I'm crying, and he's like, are you okay? And I'm like, the rocks, they're just so beautiful.
Okay. All right.
What about you, nerds?
So I think I said on the last episode I got engaged. I don't know if you saw that on anywhere, Amanda. I don't know. We're not. I don't know. I think Nova made one post, and that was about it.
Well, congratulations.
So that's been going on. And then aside from that, we haven't really done any planning. We're really a go with the flow couple. So I don't know. We're working on like finding a house first. But then like nerd stuff. I finished Star Trek Picard season 2. It was okay. A lot of people on the internet shit on it. It's not great. It's not as like ethically focused or morally focused as like TNG was. It's alright. It's not great. It's not terrible either. And then I started Strange New Worlds. They said they had the first episode of that. That was pretty good. I think that's going to be a little more episodic, so I think that's going to be better. And I finished Moon Knight. Moon Knight was also cool. I like that one a lot more than I thought I would.
Yeah, I heard that it has like it's a little different.
It's for like quality wise and just like the acting wise and the way that the story goes. I would say it's on like WandaVision like level of good.
Ooh, that sounds great.
Yeah, like Falcon and Winter Soldier. It's all right. Each one of these ones seems to want to talk about something in the real world, like Falcon and Winter Soldier. You know, like, but you know the treatment of black people, treatment of veterans after they get home from the military. All right, but it doesn't really say much about it. But like seeing Moon Knight, the multiple characters that Oscar Isaac plays and how it kind of portrays at least, you know, the superhero version of DID. It's definitely better than like Split. From a like representation kind of perspective. And it's just really interesting visually when you see you know, he's playing one character 1 minute, and he's just like a normal guy, and then all of a sudden stuff starts to go real weird, and he's like, what's going on? All of a sudden it's Tuesday, and then, oh my god, like, there's this, he's in somewhere completely else getting shot at. It's a good show. The first episode is a real roller coaster, because if you don't know the kind of conceit with Moon Knight, it's very confusing until the second episode where they start to kind of reveal what's going on.
Yeah, I don't know anything about Moon Knight.
It's like, you know, spoilers for a, I don't know, 30-year-old comic, but it's about a dude who has multiple personalities in him, and multiple personalities, and also an Egyptian god of the moon, giving him superpowers. But is the Egyptian god also a multiple personality thing, or is it literally magic? The comic goes back and forth on what that is. And then he has different personalities. Some of them are just like normal folks. It's like 4 of them, if I remember. One's just like a normal dude. One is like a mercenary assassin dude. One is like a serial killer or something, I don't know, or just like a worse bad guy, and one's like a little girl, and they all reside in like an adult man body, and then the whole comic is just like him dealing with that.
Amazing. And
then the show obviously streamlines a lot of that, and it's basically just 2 of them, at least for this season, and it's pretty good.
The only screenshot I've seen of Moon Knight is it's just like it's a screenshot of like Oscar Isaac, and then just like
being crazy
next to him, a little bit behind him is like a hippopotamus.
Yep.
And I'm like, whatever's going on here.
There's a giant friendly hippopotamus god in this show.
I love that.
Interesting.
I love that.
It's a good watch, and Oscar Isaac is absolutely the key to making it. Like, his acting, portraying just these 2 characters stuck in one body who like slowly have to like, one, realize what's going on, and then two, start working together to stop the bad thing that's happening. Very good, because it's him switched. He's
so
very good. Yeah,
he's so good.
He makes the show. Like, if it was any other person who was not as good as an actor, it would be a terrible, awful shit show.
It's funny because, like, immediately the only other name that comes up in my mind, of like who could pull something like that off is Pedro Pascal, and it's like,
okay,
why are these two?
I think so.
These two are like the two right now, where
the two.
It's like it's the two of them. It's their time. They are the Tom and Brad of our era, and I am so happy about it. And these two actually like each other, unlike Tom and Brad.
And actually, now that I think about it, Picard and Moon Knight both deal with, like, childhood trauma, familial trauma, and how that manifests itself once you become an adult. And Moon Knight does it so much better than Picard. Like, it's not even funny. Like, Picard is, like, extremely ham-handed, and Moon Knight is, even though it's like a superhero show with transforming Egyptian moon gods, it's still, like, more down to earth and more believable.
Damn, that's incredibly damning.
Yeah.
Like, Star Trek is supposed to be good at that stuff.
Yeah, you'd think so. And they don't, I don't know, at least the writers of Picard don't really seem to have an idea of what they want to do and what Star Trek is supposed to be. Because there's a lot of murder in that show. Just a lot of wanton murder without anyone thinking of the consequences.
Yeah,
I'm like, you guys are supposed to be Starfleet officers. You're not supposed to just literally cut people's heads off.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing that, like, DS9 started to, like, explore and break down, is that, like, you know, Starfleet presents themselves as, like, an exploratory entity,
organization.
But really, they're military.
Yes, in a lot of ways they are military, but at least DS9 explored that, of, like, there's the contradiction. Sisko absolutely has problems with the things he has to do during the Dominion War, but he, like, the famous line, like, he can live with it. Versus, like, Picard, which does not grapple with those questions at all. Just, like, a Romulan dude's on their team, he wants to join Starfleet, that's cool. Also, he just slits a dude's throat in that same episode, because he's a bad guy.
Woof. Yeah, it's the, like...
And they just move on.
That stuff would be fine if they at least, like...
They don't acknowledge it
and,
at
like,
all.
faced it and, like, you know, try to, like, do something interesting and...
Not one iota of the show is devoted to that.
That's exactly the thing that scares me about the Star Trek shows that are out now, is that, like,
they don't...
You guys, you're cowards.
Yeah.
You're cowards.
Like, there's a lot of... Like, that's my biggest problem with with a lot of the new Trek shows. There's a lot of flowery talking, but there's usually no moral or ethical quandary that they really face with the show. Discovery was okay, especially the last season. It dealt with things a little better, but both seasons of Picard, there's a lot of murder. There's a lot of, like, just, you know, wanton, you know, breaking the laws of, like, Starfleet and stuff with, like, no regard for, you know, the greater impact of what that means. They're not even, like, even if we as the viewers don't care, like, they should care a little bit, because these things are supposed to be important to them, and even if they have to break those rules, and they have to do bad things for, like, you know, the greater good. This one's all about, like, time travel and saving the future and all that stuff. And they just keep killing people. Just every episode, someone's getting brutally killed. Like, heads chopped off, throats slit, people getting vaporized. Just, what? And no one bats an eye. It's just like, what is going on?
I hate to make it the nerd war thing, but from what you're describing, they're kind of trying to make it Star Wars.
You think?
And it's like,
have you seen J.J. Abrams' Star Trek?
They're intrinsically two different things. I'm not going to get into it. good franchises, and I enjoy both of them.
Yeah.
But they do two different things.
They're supposed
and
to,
they're two different kinds of things. And
yeah.
Stop.
I think, and like, funny enough,
it's this like homogenization of
it's a brand more than anything at this point.
Sci-fi action adventure media, where it's like everything ends up being the same instead of like letting things be different.
Yeah.
But there's this habit of like, oh, this is what does well, or we're seeing that this thing is doing well, so let's make everything like this thing, and it's like, to a certain extent, sure, but also like, why?
Why even do Star Trek then? Oh,
right. Why even do Star Trek?
Do
something else.
Because it's a brand.
We don't have to worry. It won't be Star Wars for long. It's going to be Marvel soon, because Marvel was so successful that everything's going to be Marvel for a little while.
I mean, that's kind of already happening, but...
Hey, I just talked about Moon Knight.
Can you tell that I'm being upset?
I just talked about Moon Knight, and at least they made something good with Moon Knight.
Right, and like, you know, speaking of like multiverse things, right? Doctor Strange just came out, and I've heard mixed opinions about Doctor Strange, to say the least.
It wasn't my favorite.
I hear some people...
I will say, something that is both exciting and upsetting to me is that they're clearly setting up a Young Avengers, either a TV show or a movie, I'm not sure. Like, it's absolutely coming, and I can't wait, but also I absolutely am terrified to see my babies.
I know, you're a Young Avengers stan.
I'm a Young Avengers stan.
Back.
It's kind of the only property of theirs that I, like, care about.
And it's coming.
Yeah.
Ever since WandaVision introduced those kids, I'm like, oh, I see what they're doing.
Oh, no, I've known it was coming since, like, way back in, like, the second or third season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where they started talking about the Skrull. I'm like, it's happening. It's happening. It's happening. It's happening.
All right. The last thing I will say about Star Trek, the live-action shows, yes, absolutely. A lot of them seem like just generic action show. I hope Strange New Worlds is better. But the anime shows are actually pretty good, kind of old Star Trek stuff. Lower Decks, animated by the guys who do Rick and Morty, but it's not that... It's kind of that lampshading, winking at the audience sort of humor, but it works. It works for what it's doing. That is definitely like more Star Trek than a lot of the live action shows, even though it's a comedy. And Prodigy, the one that they did for Nickelodeon, that one is pretty Star Trek. That one is like it is about a ship of essentially all kids, learning, former slaves essentially, learning how to do Starfleet things, learning how to like be better. And do different things than the things that they were forced to do in a labor camp, and they're being taught by a hologram of Janeway, and it's really, that one's really good. That is a Star Trek show, and the very good episode of that one is where the main kid, the main purple kid, I forget his name because I saw it a little while ago, but he takes the Kobayashi Maru test. And he crews his virtual ship in the holodeck with all famous former Starfleet personnel. So, like, his security officer is Odo, his science officer is Spock, his communications officer is Uhura, his doctor is Crusher, and all of the voicing in the show is like clips from the older shows, but edited to make it sound like they're reacting to what he's saying.
That's fun.
So it's a really fun episode, and Gabe McFadden came back as Crusher, so she just voices some new stuff as Crusher on that episode.
I love it.
So the anime shows, Lower Decks, Prodigy, very good Star Trek stuff. I think it's flying under the radar right now. I'd say watch those over the live action shows at this point.
Yeah. On my drive to work, there's these two billboards that always have some Star Trek thing on there. And for a while it was Lower Decks, and then it was Picard.
It's always whatever the newest one is.
Yeah. Like, I love Star Trek. I love my fully automated gay space communism. But I just...
I would not blame
I just need them to like not be cowards and not just try to like. I think the thing that made and makes Star Trek appealing is its willingness to face and explore and actually like
hold a mirror up
to difficult things.
Picard does that to some extent with like ice and pollution and global warming stuff, but it doesn't go any farther than like showing this bad.
Climate change is bad.
And then moving on.
I was actually just... So, one of the things... I started listening to the audiobook of another Ursula K. Le Guin book, The Left Hand of Darkness, which is one of her sci-fi books.
Okay.
And in the preamble for it, there's like a short essay, like introduction before like the actual beginning of the book, where she talks about like what sci-fi does, and she talks about how sci-fi, even though it's usually set in the future, it's about today. It's not about predictions of the future. Writers are not predictors. They're not oracles. They are mirrors. They don't tell the truth about tomorrow, but they explore some truth about the current day. So I think there's a sort of misunderstanding even among some writers of what sci-fi, the function of sci-fi as a form of media. And this is where like I hold up my degree. Please. I have the credentials.
I have to use this for something.
I know, and this is what I use it for. It's just like, I don't know. I think sci-fi is such it's an incredible tool that we as human beings created of like, how can we explore difficult topics of today under the context, under the guise of some future where the consequences of these things have like taken hold. It's really interesting, and I absolutely recommend picking up The Left Hand of Darkness, if only just to read that preamble, because it's really eye-opening, and it kind of like it kind of makes you interact with sci-fi and like stuff that like deals with like a future, quote unquote, right, in a different way, or like you can see it in a different way. It's really interesting. Ursula K. Le Guin.
Okay, so we've been going on. Amanda, what have you been up to?
Speaking of books, I did finish a book this weekend. I read Circe by Madeline Miller, and it was absolutely fantastic. I had never read it before. It was a recommendation from a friend. But the book is about it's a retelling of the Odyssey from the perspective of Circe, who's like a sorceress. And it's really amazing because they kind of take on that trend of, this is difficult to explain, but of taking older, especially like Greek and Roman myths and retelling them from the perspective of more minor characters. Like literature is historically so male-dominated, so to take like a female perspective on the events. And this is a story that I'm really familiar with, so it's really interesting to kind of challenge like our idea of a hero. Like Odysseus is like so traditional, like a hero character, but to have them like pick him apart.
He's literally legendary.
Like, right, but like his pride got dozens of men killed for no reason. Oh, yeah. Just like, oh, I hadn't thought of you're right, that was really deplorable. And they do a really good job of giving all of the women in the story agency throughout this book, and it's not just fantastic from like a storytelling perspective, but from like the feel like the traditional scope of women's lives. It's neat to see the parallels between what happens to Circe, and I feel like the stages that like women go through in life, and just the book by itself is just fantastic. She's so well written, and there's lots and lots to think about.
Yeah, that one's one that's been recommended a lot, and it's been sitting in my list for a while. Definitely going to check it out.
As someone who likes folklore, it's like, oh, it's all the noms. It's so good.
If I remember my Odyssey correctly, Cersei turns a bunch of Odysseus' dudes into pigs?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
Ruin, I don't know if you remember when
the
we
one
were
shot
first
that you
working
did.
out. Yeah, the one shot that we did, because when I was first working out my character Dot's backstory, her patron, one of the things that she did was the Johns that came through, if they were shitheads, she would turn them into pigs.
Yes.
And if that is fully, like, stolen from Cersei, because I
know.
used a lot of different witch mythos and witch characters from mythology and legend to inspire her.
And if I remember correctly, at least in the original, it's portrayed as she's kind of doing it vindictively or something like that.
Well, all women are evil traditionally, but yes.
But I assume in this new telling, even when the Simpsons did like their version of the Odyssey, even in their version, Cersei's like, these guys just got turned into pigs because he did some stupid shit, and she's just like, your guys are a bunch of idiots, and they got themselves like magicked.
I won't ruin it. She has she's not a perfect character. She doesn't stand behind all of the decisions that she makes. But the turning people into pigs is very justifiable.
Yeah, I assume it is. Because to be fair, like Odysseus, like reading even the original, like you said, Odysseus like makes a bunch of like shitty decisions. And
yes, she doesn't turn Odysseus into a pig.
No. And she sends him to the River Styx, right?
Among other things. She doesn't, like, send him there vindictively. He needs a thing, and she tells him where it is.
She tells him where to go, yeah.
Yeah. He needs to speak to Tiresias.
Yeah.
Who's dead.
Of course. But no, that's super interesting. The only one of those I think I've ever read is, like, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead, where it, reinterprets Hamlet from the perspective of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who are just like the two dudes who like just sit in the background and they're like, "Yo, that's happening." And then it's interesting because it fills in some of those gaps of just like what were they doing when this thing was happening, when Ophelia was jumping out the window or whatever it was, and that one's a little interesting because it's also portrayed as kind of a play, but also kind of real. So the conceit at the end is like their lives are like this loop that they're just walking through this fog, and things just keep repeating because everyone keeps repeating and reinterpreting the play of Hamlet itself.
Oh, interesting. I haven't seen that. I've heard of it, but I've never read it.
It's an interesting one by the end because you think you're just reading the story from their perspective, and then by the end you realize you're reading the real life of the characters that's being influenced by the fact that the play is still a prolific thing even in the modern day. So the ending's pretty interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah, and speaking of theatrical interpretations of mythology, tonight I'm gonna go see Hades Town.
Oh yeah.
Ooh, I'm jealous.
I'm gonna go see Orpheus be sad.
Okay.
And Hades is gonna go, I want this twink destroyed.
Didn't I mess you up in the game with some sort of Orpheus stuff where you weren't supposed to look back and you did?
Yes.
That was your Layla, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was when we were going through some portal and there were hands.
You were specifically told not to look backwards, and you did.
And then I did. Because I was like, wouldn't it be funny if I'm a dog and I try to yap at the hands reaching through this portal, and then you were very specific.
It wasn't even a portal. It was like you were traveling through a liminal space of darkness, and there were all these hands, and then you were specifically told, just don't turn around, just don't look at them, just walk forward, and
now she has a demon.
She has something. She has something inside her.
Yeah.
Some level of her being.
Sometimes you gotta go for the joke, though. I mean...
Exactly. Listen, it's not me if I'm not doing it for the bit. It's a game, okay? If you don't do it for the bit, what are you doing?
You weren't the only one who... It wasn't just you, though.
Yeah, no,
like, it was your whole group and multiple people just, like, turned around.
I think it was just me and one other person turned around.
That's more than one. That's more than zero.
That is more than one. It's that joke of, like, if I had a dime for every
infinitely
time
more than
I would have
zero.
2 dimes, but it's weird that it happened. Infinitely more than zero.
It is. It's mathematically infinitely more than zero. Any number is.
I hate you. Anyways,
I think it's
I
think it's mathematically one more than zero, but
percentage-wise, it's infinitely more than zero.
Okay.
Oh boy, but
you know what is infinitely more than zero?
What?
My curiosity about the Forgotten Realms.
Yes.
Amanda, what do we got today?
So, when last we spoke, we talked about the Dawn War, the battle between the gods, the primordials, and the Aberranths, and the creation of the Feywild and the Abyss. If you didn't join us last time, all you have to know is that the sun was destroyed, and Abiturel, the planet that Forgotten Realms takes place on, is in its first ice age. Everything on the entire world is dead. Today, I'm going to talk about the twin sons of Tempest and the First Gods' War. So, legend said that Tempest had 2 sons. His first son, Corellin, was light, swift, beautiful, but he was also capricious and vain. His other son, Grummish, was dark, steady, enduring, but he was also stubborn and quick to anger. Both of these gods were born during the Dawn War. They were born to fight. But Grummish really excelled in this. In the fights against the Primordials and the Obelisks, he gained the nickname of He Who Never Sleeps, because during the millennia-long conflict, he never took a break and he never rested until they were victorious. While Corellin was a fantastic fighter, he did not hold a torch to his brother.
Damn, we hate a workaholic.
Right. He's the younger brother, too, which makes it, like, all the more painful.
Overachievers. They make the rest of us look bad.
But after the end of the Dawn War, the gods sat down to divide the lands of Abiturel between them. They decided they wanted to make creatures to inhabit the world, and they needed to decide where each of them would stay. And they only had so many resources on Abiturel. They decided the best way to choose was to draw lots. So Corellin drew first, and he drew the forest for his people, the elves. Moradin drew the mountains for the dwarves. Garl Glittlegold drew the hills for the Garl Glittlegold drew the hills for the gnomes, and Yolanda drew the fields and meadows for the halflings. When Grummish stepped up to draw his lot, he found that the other gods did not include his name in the drawing. And instead they laughed at him.
Yeah, he got Maleficented.
And he demanded that they redraw. Yes, absolutely, right? So he demanded that they redraw, and they said no.
See, they don't know yet that it's a bad idea to not include somebody in the party because there's no stories yet about how badly not including people in the party goes. They don't have that mythology yet.
They don't know.
Grimm's didn't write Maleficent yet.
At this point, they're like, wouldn't it be funny if we just didn't put his name in the bucket? Oh yeah, everyone thinks he's great. Let's do that. That's going to be funny.
Oh, wow. Man, yeah, he's totally got the kind of sense of humor where that can get pulled off. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Just so the gods,
they're doing it for the bit.
They are doing it. They're committing.
So gods determine where the mortal races would, originate and reside by random chance.
Well, they drew lots, and then they were like, okay, you go first. It's like, well, I want the forest. And then the person who drew next was like, okay, what else is there? Okay, I want the mountains. And then when they got to the orcs, they didn't have anything left. And they were just like, whatever, I got what I wanted, bye.
Oh, boy.
But,
okay, so
yes.
was drawing the lots to draw what race that they were in charge of?
No. while the gods already have, like, these gods are associated to races, their races didn't exist yet, and I'll get to that in a second. But they're like, hey, I want to make a thing, but before I do, like, I want to choose what spot is mine for me to create my people on.
They were choosing, like, they were drawing the lots to see, like, what order they were going in. Like, who would get first dibs. Okay.
Right, yes.
Wow.
So Coralon got first dibs.
Yes.
Got it.
And he was like, I'm taking the forest. It's got all the good foods and the shade. Frickin' elves. It's going to be a common theme throughout the next few episodes. So Grummish is obviously very angry. And he takes his spear and then he stabs Abir Terrell in multiple places. And he says, that's fine. My people will reside here and here and here. And everywhere he stabs, like a cavern is created. And he's like, because my people will have no place, they will be forever trying to take yours.
Ooh. Oh boy.
Yeah, he was not happy. Because Grummish felt that Corellin was kind of leading this charge, and because they were brothers and because they've never gotten along, Grummish challenges Corellin to a duel. And Corellin readily accepts. The only problem is that they're two even deities. They're created from the same father, and they are equally matched, so their battle lasts like a millennia. They're just fighting over every plane of existence, on and on, until finally Grummish, they're battling over every plane of existence, on and on. Corellin is faster, but he has magic, whereas Grummish is stronger and he's steadfast, but he's mostly relying on, like, brutal force. At the very end of this fight, Grummish strikes a deadly blow against Corellin, and Corellin falls.
Okay.
While Corellin is lying prostrate in the grass, the moon is shining down upon him, and the moon takes pity on him and begins to cry. And the tears of the moon fall down onto Corellin's wounds, and from that, the goddess Sehin Moonbow is born.
Hey, Moon Knight.
Yeah! Oh, yeah, kind of, yeah.
That's literally a plot point in Moon Knight.
Oh! So, as Grummish goes to finish Corellin, Sehin Moonbow, like, breathes into existence and then stops his final attack.
Okay.
And then Grummish accused Corellin of cheating, because technically they were dueling. But while Grummish is distracted, Corellin draws his bow and fires an arrow, and strikes Corellin in the left eye. Corellin draws his bow, shoots an arrow, and strikes Grummish in his left eye.
Douchebag!
Yeah, half blinding him.
Come on.
Grummish retreats, and technically the first God's War is over.
Oh boy. So
that's very oh god, who is it in the Egyptian? I think it's Set and Ra, where Set takes Ra's eye.
Okay.
I think that's right.
I don't know Egyptian mythology as well.
Yeah, there's some eye bullshit in Egyptian mythology. Okay. But I can basically I'm seeing some where, like, some of the inspiration for this narrative coming from other shit.
That makes a lot of sense.
So while these two were duking it out for millennia, like you say, the other gods were just chilling, just waiting.
Yeah, it was kind of their fight. This is one of the most told and retold stories in, like, Faerunian history. So some of them say that all of the gods got involved and they were all fighting each other, but I couldn't find anywhere that lists any of the other gods in the conflict.
So they were just, like, on the sidelines, just like...
Yeah, they either like,
nice
whatever.
So they were just like, come on, guys, we want to start, like, all of existence, but they're still fighting.
Or they're all distracted by making their own races. It's just like, no, I'm gonna make gnomes really perfect. I really just, what do they do? I don't care. You think they're?
I'm sorry, I'm busy. I'm
crafting.
I have to watch the clay in the kiln.
and also, it's important to remember that, like, death exists now, but no god has ever died. And in fact, a lot of the stories question whether Grummish could have even killed Corellin.
Okay.
Because gods aren't even partially mortal yet.
Okay.
But this story is particularly interesting because there are two completely separate accounts. So the first account was the story that the elves tell. I mean, I leaned a little bit into Corellin being kind of a shitbag, but they would have told you that he was clever and that he was, saved by the devotion of the moon and lovely stuff. But if you ask,
mine to outwit the foolish Grummish.
Yes, because Grummish was dumb and slow and ugly. I don't know what that has to do with the fighting, but they will always mention how ugly he is. But this story also has an alternate version. If you asked a shaman, an orcish shaman, a follower of Grummish, about this tale, they would say that most of it ended the same way. Grummish was going to kill Corellin. Corellin cheated by using magical intervention with the moon. But they claim that Grummish always had one eye and that Corellin's final attack missed. And then Grummish was just kind of upset and left. That makes a little less sense to me.
Didn't shoot our god. No.
That's
why it took so long. He didn't have good depth perception.
But in either case, a Grummish retreats.
Okay.
But much like the Dawn War, anytime these gods were struck, they bled. And every droplet of blood that hit the ground created an elf or an orc.
Oh, wow.
And this is kind of an interesting point in time, because you're imagining, droplet hits the ground, orc. But orcs and elves didn't really exist yet, so they were like these formless entities that would one day be creatures. So imagine a droplet hits the ground, and then it's like a mirrored but smaller reflection of their god. So mini wispiness of Corellin and mini wisp of Grummish. Because they would later be races. Right now, they're just kind of like the idea of what will someday be. Wow. And this is important because this conflict between the two brothers shapes what the races will eventually be. Like, Grummish decides to make orcs the way that they are because of this conflict. He chooses to make them sturdy, war-ready people. Like, that's why they're muscular. Between them having no homes and being eternally cursed to wander the lands and fight for every inch of things that they get, he made them those people on purpose. And Corellin, because of this combat, made his people more magically focused, more clever. It's you will never be strong enough to fight the orcs. We have to be more magical and more nimble.
Mm-hmm. So the elves and the orcs are the oldest races because of that.
It depends on what you consider age, because also, in the most confusing fashion possible, is none of this is happening on Abbey Terrell. These are all happening in different planes of existence.
Okay.
So when you consider how old the races are, I think most people consider when they appeared on the prime material plane. Yes. Which will all happen at different times.
That's what I thought we were talking about, but I was wrong, apparently.
Not yet. So, this is all happening in, study hall. Everyone's deciding, what they're gonna do. They're stealing each other's project supplies. They only left Grummish with a green crayon. He's really upset.
Oh, boy. Okay, so after this first God War is concluded, what happens next?
So all of the droplets become what will one day be elves and what will one day be orcs. And we're going to shift over to Corellin a little bit. So he's got all these wispy droplets of things in front of him, and he's slowly coming up with the concept of what he wants elves to be. But he has favorite wisps, things that show real promise. So what he does is he takes aspects of himself and then mates demigods. So his own pantheon of elvish people. And chief among them, his favorite wisp, he names Orishni. And he makes her the goddess of weaving, destiny, and dark elves. And that is what I would like to talk about next time.
Okay.
Is the goddess of dark elves.
Okay.
Cough.
Okay, cool. So interesting. So
Wait,
this is
question.
kind of this.
Was you earlier in the Cersei conversation? Was you saying because women are evil? Was that a foreshadowing?
A little bit.
No, That's interesting, though, because, yeah, just historically, through osmosis, the perception in the game is that Dark Elves are bad, but
they are still born of Corellon, yeah.
And then, but they have their own, specific demigod and all of that, and I assume the lore plays into all of that once we get there.
I cannot wait to tell you this story. This is probably my favorite story in folklore, and it's going to be really hard for me not to be very, very biased. But it does. No. It does have similar tones to Grummish's story, because orcs are historically evil. Yeah. They've only recently, like with the introduction of half orcs and even just good full orcs, they've become more lenient towards their history. But the idea is that Grummish is slow and dumb and ugly, and his people are evil. But I didn't alter these facts. So even before the recent resurgence, Corellon cheated and stole, which is fun.
And it's that thing of like, he who wins gets to determine who's good and who's bad and who's the cheater and who's the winner and who got cheated. And
I feel like that's going to be a theme with a lot of the stories moving forward, that we're getting into, like, the material races.
This also has the same theme of, like, the light folks are good and the dark folks are bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
which is where you turn to the writers and you go, really? This is what you're doing? Okay.
Yeah.
And this is something I highlighted at the beginning, is you have Shar and Saloon. Shar is the goddess of darkness and Saloon is the goddess of light. And especially in this beginning, there's like a very direct dichotomy between like, these are the good people and these are the bad people. But it's important to remember that like good and bad don't even really exist yet. So these are just all people.
Yeah. And I assume we're going to get into like, there are in-world explanations for those sort of things, but that's obviously more so a reflection of like who was writing these things at the time.
Yeah, this is the point where we gotta step back and go, let's remember this is not real, and somebody wrote this, and somebody made these choices, and like you can't entirely remove the responsibility of the authors. I mean, you could hand wave it away and say, oh, it was the time, but also like, like this is post 70s, civil rights era. Like you can only get away with so much couched racism before people are even in the 80s and 90s go, this is weird. These are some weird choices.
Maybe.
What are you trying to say here, bud?
Maybe there was a reason that the D&D community was kind of homogenous for a while.
Yeah.
To their credit, like I mentioned, they are backing away from a lot of the more like strict revelations, but you're right.
But I think that really goes to show like the positive evolution of the I almost called it a franchise, but of the like IP, I guess, is like acknowledging that like cultural divergence is a thing that happens in different cultures that live in different places and have different ideas, have different spiritual practices and religious practices and different ideas of what is good and bad and what the focus of your society should be, and how those things affect how you interact with the world. And I think that now the idea is less that like these things make you good and these things make you bad, and it's more like these things make you different, and in each society there are good people and there are bad people, and those definitions can shift depending on that society's definitions of those things and their priorities and stuff, but like cultural divergence is not the same thing as these people are good and these people are bad.
Absolutely, yeah.
This is exactly like the kind of conversations that like inspired this podcast. Because like Faerun and I, we used to like sit and talk for like an hour after our games, talking about like exactly this, of how like the D&D lore was created in a way that kind of like explains and hand waves away like why we're just like automatically supposed to assume orcs are evil and elves are good, when, you know, real life is a lot more complicated than that, and that sort of like racial determinism is bad. And why it is good that now we're starting to challenge that a bit more and go, well, who tells the story is what determines who's good and bad, and, you know, we have to like actually explore that a bit more. Examine that.
And this makes it such a much more compelling story if you want to play an orc, rather than like orcs are evil because they are. It's like, no, orcs are evil because they've never had a home and they were cheated out of a fair shot, and they have to fight for every inch that they have. They were literally created for war. And that's so much more interesting than they were just bad
on the planet to essentially do a holy race war.
Yeah,
because they don't have a home.
It's not that they're evil, it's that they started out disadvantaged.
Yeah.
They started out with a huge disadvantage, and they had to carve out, with the tools that they were given, which was violence, they had to carve out a space for themselves with whatever they had. And what they were given by their creator was violence.
Does that society come with intrinsic problems? Yes.
Yeah, it's like it's a society created out of spite. But
that's the whole thing of like when you tell me this, I'm like, the gods really fucked both these races really. Everyone like everyone hates the orcs because now they're put on this planet, you know, like you say, to fight out of spite, and you know, no orc or half orc or anything, you know, millennia later is gonna know that. They're not really gonna know that. They're gonna have the stories of Grummish, but like they weren't there. So like
they just know they had to be strong and they have to put the clan before everything else. And
exactly.
They're supposed to expand their territory.
And the elves.
Creates a cycle. It creates a cycle where it's like, well, we've always been fighting, so this is just what we do.
Yeah. And then the elves are essentially the same way, but from the opposite end of like, we're better because we're better, and we don't, you know, question that.
The elves,
what had to happen for us to be in this better. More like privileged situation. Yeah.
I cannot wait to talk about the elves. They have so much. Their history is so much bloodier than I would have anticipated, and I cannot wait to tell you about how all of the things that they've done that make them just as complicated as some of the evil races.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, if we wanna, it's not like in real life there are countries and societies where their story is presented as, you know, flowery with polka dots, and then you pull the curtain and it's just a fucking bloodbath. It doesn't happen in real life. Not at all.
No, we live in America. That don't happen here. No.
No, that's definitely not in America. Mm-hmm. There are not corpses in every square inch of this country. What are you talking about?
No, go ahead.
But if you're interested in this story, oh boy, do I have some source content for you. Like I mentioned, this is one of the most prolific stories in Faerunian history. The Forgotten Realms really likes their battles between Corelling and Grummish. But the sources that I used were 2 Dragon Magazine articles, number 62 and number 408, as well as the Complete Book of Elves, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, The Complete Monster Mythology, and Faerun, you're going to have to help me pronounce this because I've never said it out loud. Mordekainen's Tome of Foes.
Mordekainen's Tome of Foes, yeah.
Okay.
Mordenkainen.
Some people say Mordenkainen as well. I think it's Kainen. Like, same thing.
I think it's Kainen. I think it sounds
That's how
more.
I've always heard it be pronounced. And then one last thing with the notes. In the notes you sent over, it's the creation of the Eladrin. So, like, the Eladrin are, like, the first version of the elves.
Yes, I'll go over this more in depth later, but Corelling creates a race of things, and first he calls them the Eladrin. Elves aren't created till later, but I will talk about that next week.
Sure, because I've always been unclear on what the separation is between them and like wood elves or high elves or whatever. But
I always assumed that it was more of a like the Eladrin are the like pure form, and then the other elves are like a diluted form of them.
I think like if you asked Corellin, I think that all elves are elves in his eyes, that he called them the Eladrin and that they called themselves elves. This is just my interpretation. And that the differences are more cultural than they are race related. Oh. So like they're all physically they're all physically the same, but like the difference between wood elves and high elves are just like societal rather than, I mean, they may have some like appearance traits that are a little different, but that's I think more based on their region and their history than it is on like their actual like biology. But also it's a fantasy game, so I don't know what their biology is.
I mean, it's in the same way that, like, you know, humans have those sort of, like, people who have been in, like, one area for, you know, hundreds of years. It's how, you know, our skin melanin changed, right?
It's the reason I can go outside and not get a sunburn, but Nova can't.
Right. The people who evolved more towards the equator in hotter climates developed higher pigment in their skin that's like a way to like protect from the sun, where like people who evolved more in the sort of like Scandinavian area tended to be white. And like that's or like in the Caucasus or whatever, like it's,
so we're all elves, just some of us are dark elves, some of us are Eladrin.
But like the places where we were determine certain aspects of our like physical.
Sure, I never knew. Like, to the Eladrin thing, I just never knew like what their differences story was, and it sounds like we'll get into that in the next one.
Yeah, because like as far as we know, like the Eladrin have like a little bit more going on than even like wood elves and high elves.
Yeah, I always thought high elves were like the old, you know, original ones, but apparently not.
They would like you to think that.
That's what I think. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
They call themselves the high elves. I mean, come on.
Oh boy, even so like the elves are already like we're already better than everyone, but these elves are like we're even better than all the other elves.
I cannot wait to tell you. Oh my goodness.
Oh, I like that we're getting into the material races now, because the God War, because all the God War stuff is cool, but it's all very ethereal, very very mythological, and to a certain point, after a certain point, doesn't impact the goings on of the world too much, beyond like giving motivations for where these things originally came from. But now I want to see like, okay, now that we have the fire started essentially, or the fuse lit, like how does the dynamite explode when all the races interact with each other?
Yes, because just to remind you, the world is still dead right now. Yeah. There's no sun. There's all encased in ice. Everyone's just doing their homework where they're waiting for They're waiting for Saloon to press the reset button, and they're like, while she's doing that, I might as well get some sketches down.
While she's doing that, Grummish and Corella in her fight, just like, fine, like, we'll take a couple millennia off, figure out what's going on, let me get some clay to mold some mortals. Okay. Yeah, this is getting real good, and yeah, I absolutely want to get into the history of the elves, because they're always interesting to talk about, and then definitely start getting, because they're probably gonna be first because they're age-wise usually the oldest, and then start talking about the others as well.
So this is a sneak peek. They're not first.
Oh,
but
shit!
We're gonna have a lot of elf lore in the next few bits.
Of elf lore, just saying that they were the first.
Every race says they're the first. Every lore that you see, giants were the first, elves were the first, dwarves of every race.
Dragons.
Except for gnomes and halflings, because they don't care.
Yeah, they don't care. They're like, whatever. You're the first? Okay, cool. We're the best.
No, they genuinely like...
First, but our cooking's the best.
Yes. Yeah. You're the first, that's fine. I'm going to take a nap. Yep, okay. Those are halflings, yeah.
It's like, oh, you're the first, that's nice.
Yeah,
that's nice. Don't care.
Good on you.
Don't care, didn't ask, plus you're tall, so...
You're too big for my house, get out.
So we've got Corellon and Grimmish nugging each other to death, and then they go off and do some research and development on what they want to be in charge of. And so we've got orcs, we've got Eladrin, now what?
Yeah, absolutely. Now what?
Oh, I'm excited. I am excited. Yeah, getting into the races now. Love it. And especially when we get to the Dragon Board. Dragon Board is always my favorite race. I know they're a little ways off, though.
What's like, at this point, what's like the what's going on amongst the gods? What's the tea? What are the relationships?
That's pretty much it. Is the god, like I said, I imagine Shar and Saloon are trying to work on the dead world problem. The other gods are really kind of aloof. We have Tempest, which I think is Corellin and Grumish's father. He's the god of war, so he's real happy. His sons are fighting, so he's got his own shit going on.
Jeez.
You've got Jergal, which is the god of death. I mean, I'll have to have an episode just dedicated to him because his history is not really connected to anything, but he's one of my favorite characters.
Okay. He's
so good. Talada, the goddess of poison. She has very little history. They created her very early, and they do very little with her. And then aside from that, like, other gods are being sprung into being, because this is like the point where, like, you put 2 hamsters in a cage, and then you got 8 hamsters, and now you don't know what to do, and now there's just like so.
Oh no. And
so yeah.
What about Miss Moonbow?
So Sehine Moonbow is a really interesting character. There's a lot of controversy about whether she is like, I'll get into this later, but whether she's an aspect of Saloon, so the goddess, like one of the original goddesses, the goddess of the moon, whether she's her own entity, or whether she was created by Corellin. And this is a particular point because later they get married. And that's a very interesting dynamic for those 3 things. Granted, gods aren't people. They're just like exchanging energy. They don't have the same holdups that we might about relationships. But she's a fascinating character, especially we talked a bit about the Fizban's Book of Dragons and how dragons can split their consciousnesses. And
yes.
And if that's true, and if a Sehine Moonbow is just an aspect of Saloon, then I have a theory. So Corellin and Grumish. Yeah, this is not canonical. This is just in my head. So Corellin and Grumish are brothers. Yes, and their father is obviously Tempest. He's the god of war. They're both warring races. But Corellin is the god of light, and Grumish is the god of dark when it comes to war. So hypothetically speaking, then Corellin could be the god, the son of Tempest and Saloon, god of war, god of light. And if that's true, then that changes this story a little bit. So Corellin and Grumish are fighting, and then Corellin falls down, and then the moon, who's Selene, and in my opinion, Corellin's mother, starts to cry. And then, like, her love saves him, which is, like, sweet, but also, like, really funny to think that Corellin and Grumish were fighting, and then their mom had to, like, step in and be like, no, stop beating up on your brother. Stop it. Stop it. And then also, like, gods can choose to look like however they want. Like, they are not physical beings. Grumish chooses to have a scar over one eye. Like, that is how he chooses to look. I love the idea that he's doing it to mock Corellin about the one time his mom had to come save him. That this is his way of being like, remember that time you cheated and you were a coward? Yeah, we all remember.
That time you stabbed me in the eye?
Remember? Yeah, I remember.
So,
wow.
So
Winter's Crest gets awkward after that.
So my one question then is, all this is going on with gods, like, where do they reside? Because they don't live on the material plane at this point. Are they just, like, on different planes of existence? Or
what's
like, where does Grumish go when the fight's over? Because they've been fighting across dimensions at this point.
He's got, like, one on the Upper East Side.
Corellin eventually resides in Arvindor, which is a plane of existence. Grumish has his own plane of existence. Okay. The Moradin has his own. Basically, every major god gets their own little sphere to live on.
They basically go back to their rooms and shut their doors. It's like, I'm not coming out.
Sometimes they create their own.
Playing really loud.
sometimes they make their own plane. Sometimes they go to like a Nordic plane, which I mentioned before. Like the Norse pantheon has kind of always existed. Like Muspelheim has always existed. So sometimes they take over like a Norse plane of existence, and sometimes they're just like snap their fingers and then suddenly there's something new. I mean, after the Abyss was made, I guess it was okay to just create planes of existence and not tell anybody.
Okay. And yeah, all that's still going on, isn't it? Like, hell's been created and all that stuff at this point.
Yeah, they locked up their problem god and then forgot about it.
Oh, God. And I assume that's gonna come back at some point.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's totally fine.
Okay. Cool. Any other burning questions, Lisa?
Oh, boy. I'm just like, I'm excited for elf lore.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about the Dark Elves and the High Elves and how they're all dicks to each other.
Yeah. From what it sounds like, all of the gods, like, they have their own specific aspect, but then, like, there's, like, a baseline aspect of, like, you're either of light or of dark. Does that sound right?
I think for most of them, yes, but then, like, I guess it gets a little squiffy. There is no giant family tree for the gods. Mm-hmm. Forgotten Realms has never done that, but in my headcanon, I have, like, connections. And remember that most gods are neutral. So you have Shar and Saloon, who are gods of light and gods of dark, but then anything that was created from their conflict, so the god of war is technically neutral, god of death is neutral, the god of magic is neutral, and I think some of the other races may just be a combination of those things. Like, earth and magic might be a race, or earth and death could be a race. Do you know what I mean? Where they may not be light or dark, they might just be like... Because dwarves don't really have a light or dark aspect to it. They don't have a counterpart that they're eternally battling. So I think they're more like invention and earth, maybe.
Okay.
But again, Forgotten Realms doesn't tell us, so whatever you would like to believe is totally up to you.
It's interesting, because, there is all this lore about the gods, and there's long-reaching consequences of their actions, which is passed down in the game through just like stories and stuff. But the gods also exist in this world. Yeah. But so like you can't really be an atheist. I mean, you can kind of and just play like that. But then also like if you go high enough, you can like say what's up to Tiamat or whatever.
Yeah. You could choose not to follow a god, but like saying that gods don't exist would be really difficult. It'd be like saying the sky doesn't exist.
Yeah. Right.
That's
because I feel like the gods in D&D, they don't really play the same role that like gods play in the real world, where like religion is like a thing that people go to war over. People aren't really in D&D. They're not really.
I'm pretty sure there's going to be some religious wars in this lore.
Well, the thing that they're fighting about. Well, the thing that they're fighting about isn't that like, oh, you don't believe in the same religion as I do, or like I'm going to force you. It's more like, they're fighting like the continuation of those initial fights between those gods.
Yeah, it's that's a good point, because it's very rarely based on beliefs. It's mostly based on a race or location. Or like resources.
Okay.
And you're right. It's more of a reflection of the conflicts between the gods than it is like,
keep going
hey, on. we serve the gods of light and you serve the gods of dark, so we must kill you. Although there is, some of that.
There's some of that, yeah.
And then there's the implication of like light versus dark, who's good, who's evil, whoever wins.
Yes, and they have a reflection of that in a lot of the different pantheons too. It isn't. We have the main pantheon, and then every race has their own pantheon, and it feels like every time they create a pantheon, there's like the light side and the dark side. A good example is like the Seelie and Unseelie Fae, which is not a Faerunian concept that exists in Gaelic mythology, but the idea of like light and dark Fae.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I am excited. I don't have anything I don't think I have anything else at this point.
Speaking of the Feywild, at this point, do we have those other planes? The Feywild, the Ravenloft.
Oh, not the Underdark.
Shadowfell.
Shadowfell.
That's the one. Domains of Dread.
Yeah.
So I'll talk about the Feywild when I talk about the Eladrin, because those happen simultaneously. Yes.
That's what I always heard they were tied to. So
yeah, because in speaking of light and dark, even within the Feywild you have the different courts, but then as far as how the planes split, the Shadowfell is the counterpart to the Feywild.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But I'll talk about the Fey, I'll talk about the Fomorians, and I'll talk about the Eladrin. Because their history kind of intermingles.
Okay.
Hell yeah.
All right.
I think with that, if you want to hear more about Realms lore, and if you want to find out more about elves on the next time, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Amanda, you got anything
Smash
to
the
plug?
bell.
If you want to hear me talk about something completely different, you can check me out on the Taste of Dragons podcast. We release a podcast every Sunday. We talk about video games and sandwiches, and most recently I talked about Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. So that's very D&D related.
Okay.
You can check us out where fine podcasts are sold.
Sold.
Yeah, sold for free,
Sold for $0. Yeah.
For now, at least. For now, it's free. Enjoy it while it's free, babes.
They have our data. It's not free.
We are the product.
I think that's it. I think
that's
we're
it for us today.
Let's call it an episode.
Yeah, this is already over
this
an hour.
This is a good one.
Go do something else. Go eat some lunch. Drink some water.
I need food. I do need food.
And as we record this, it is Mother's Day, so if you are a person who has a mother or mother figure and you have a good relationship with them, give them a big ol' kiss on the cheek from us.
Or call if you don't live in the same place. They like it when you call, even if it's not Mother's
Call
Day.
your mother. I think that should be my thing. Call your mother.
Look, Mom just came down to stop the War of the Gods. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Give her some thanks.
Oh, yeah, this is a very, very good episode for Mother's Day. Mom came and was like, stop fighting. Stop it. I got pizza rolls.
Ooh.
When are you gonna put you're gonna get your eye put out?
Oh, look,
Corellin!
I told you you were gonna poke his eye out, and look what you did.
Go back to your rooms.
Wait until your father gets
back
home.
To your realms. Back to your realms.
Okay.
Oh boy.
Okay.
All right.
We have to stop this now.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Oops All Dragons is a group effort. Our show is edited by Noel Hernandez, our theme was composed by Brendan Lyons, and our logo art is by Azif On Q. Links to more of their work and their social media will be in the show notes. Find us on YouTube and Spotify, and check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Oops All Dragons.